Your dog may understand your emotions long before other humans notice them. And surprisingly, science suggests that may actually be true. Most people think dogs simply react to obvious things: food, walks, voices, commands. But over the last several years, researchers and canine behavior specialists have discovered something much deeper. Dogs are constantly observing human emotional signals, facial expressions, body language, tone of voice, movement, energy, even subtle behavioral changes most people barely notice themselves, which may explain why dogs sometimes behave differently around people who are sad, anxious, stressed, or emotionally overwhelmed. Many dog owners have experienced moments like this before. You sit quietly after a difficult day, and your dog suddenly comes closer. They rest beside you, place their head gently on your lap, or simply stay nearby in silence, and somehow feels intentional, as if they sense something emotionally different before you ever said a word. According to canine cognition researchers, dogs have become remarkably skilled at reading human behavior after thousands of years evolving beside us. Over time, dogs learned to pay close attention to humans because their survival depended on understanding us. And eventually, that observation evolved into emotional sensitivity. Studies show that dogs can recognize differences in human facial expressions, including happiness, anger, fear, and sadness. Some research even suggests dogs combine facial expressions with tone of voice in order to better interpret emotional states. In other words, dogs may not just hear emotion, they may actually read it. And perhaps that explains why your dog behaves differently depending on your mood. When you are relaxed, they relax more easily. When you are anxious, many dogs become more alert. And when you are emotionally distressed, some dogs quietly move closer, not because they fully understand human problems the way another human might, but because emotionally bonded animals naturally respond to emotional changes inside their social group. And to dogs, you are part of that group. In fact, behavior specialists often explain that dogs constantly monitor the emotional atmosphere around the people they trust most. They observe routines, energy levels, movement speed, voice patterns, body tension, and subtle changes in behavior. That's why many dogs can predict things before they happen. Some know you're about to leave the house before you touch the door. Some notice sadness before tears appear. Others react immediately when they hear stress in your voice. And perhaps the most fascinating part is that dogs often respond emotionally in silence. They don't interrupt. They don't ask questions. They simply stay close, sometimes quietly watching, sometimes leaning against you, sometimes following you from room to room as if making sure you're okay. And for many people, those moments feel incredibly comforting. Scientists believe part of this emotional connection may be linked to oxytocin. Oxytocin is often called the bonding hormone. It plays a major role in attachment, affection, emotional trust, and social connection. Research has shown that positive interaction between dogs and humans can increase oxytocin levels in both species, which means emotional bonding between humans and dogs is not simply emotional perception. It's biological too. And perhaps that explains why emotional comfort from dogs can feel surprisingly real and powerful. Because in many ways, the bond truly is real. Interestingly, dogs also respond strongly to human stress. Some studies suggest dogs can detect stress-related changes through scent alone. Human bodies release subtle chemical changes during emotional stress and anxiety. And dogs, with their extraordinary sense of smell, may notice these changes long before humans realize it themselves, which could explain why some dogs become more attentive during difficult emotional periods. They may literally sense that something inside the emotional environment has changed. And emotionally bonded dogs often react to those changes socially. Of course, every dog is different. Some dogs express emotional sensitivity openly. Others are quieter and more subtle. Some become physically affectionate. Others simply remain nearby and observant. But one pattern appears consistently in emotionally attached dogs. They pay attention, far more attention than most people realize. And perhaps that's one of the most beautiful things about dogs. They notice us during ordinary moments humans often overlook completely. When we're tired, quiet, stressed, heartbroken, emotionally drained, we're simply not ourselves. And somehow, many dogs respond with presence instead of judgment. Not because they understand every detail of human life, but because attachment makes them emotionally attentive to us. And over thousands of years beside humans, dogs became incredibly good at emotional observation. That may also explain why dogs are so effective in emotional support and therapy roles. Many therapy dogs are trained to recognize behavioral and emotional signals connected to anxiety, distress, or emotional instability. But even ordinary household dogs often display surprisingly similar instincts naturally. They stay nearby during emotional moments. They monitor people carefully, and they often respond calmly to sadness or stress. Perhaps because emotional closeness itself became part of the relationship between humans and dogs long ago. Not just survival, not just companionship, but emotional coexistence. And maybe that's why life with dogs feels different from almost any other relationship humans experience. Dogs do not care about appearance, success, status, or perfection. What matters most to them is familiarity, trust, routine, safety, and emotional connection. Once a dog truly bonds with someone, that person often becomes emotionally important to their daily world. Which means dogs don't simply live beside humans. Very often, they emotionally adapt themselves around us too. And perhaps that's why certain moments with dogs feel so deeply personal. The quiet stare from across the room, the gentle head resting on your leg, the way they approach silently when something feels wrong. Those moments may look simple from the outside, but emotionally, they can mean far more than people realize. And perhaps one of the clearest signs that dogs emotionally understand humans is how differently they behave depending on the emotional atmosphere of a room. Dogs are constantly scanning environments for emotional information, not only through sound, but through posture, movement, facial tension, breathing patterns, and energy shifts humans often don't consciously notice themselves. That's why many dogs immediately react when arguments happen inside a home. Some become anxious, some hide, others move closer to family members as if trying to monitor the emotional situation carefully. And interestingly, many dogs behave completely differently once calm returns again. Behavior specialists believe this happens because dogs are highly socially attuned animals. For thousands of years, survival depended on reading both humans and social environments accurately. A calm environment often meant safety. A tense environment could mean danger, unpredictability, or emotional instability. And even today, those instincts still exist beneath the surface, which may explain why emotionally connected dogs sometimes seem unusually sensitive to the emotional energy inside a home. Of course, dogs do not understand human emotions in exactly the same way humans do. They don't analyze emotional problems intellectually. They don't understand complex language or emotional history. But emotionally attached dogs often become experts at recognizing patterns connected to human feelings. And over time, they quietly learn what your sadness looks like, your stress sounds like, your happiness feels like. Some dogs even begin anticipating emotional states before they fully appear externally. A small change in posture, a slower walk through the house, a different breathing rhythm, a change in voice tone. Tiny details humans ignore completely, dogs often notice immediately, and perhaps that's why emotional bonds with dogs can feel so strangely deep. Because unlike many human interactions, dogs are constantly paying attention without needing explanations. They observe naturally, quietly, without judgment, and maybe that's part of what makes dogs feel emotionally safe to so many people. Sometimes they simply sit beside us during difficult moments without demanding anything at all. No advice, no questions, no pressure, just presence. And for many people, that kind of silent companionship becomes incredibly meaningful over time. Because sometimes emotional comfort does not come from words. Sometimes it comes from simply not feeling alone. If you want to deepen that emotional connection even further while improving your dog's behavior naturally through positive mental stimulation, there's a science-based training program many dog owners have found incredibly helpful. It's called Brain Training for Dogs. And instead of punishment-based methods, it focuses on communication, trust, emotional engagement, and mentally stimulating exercises that strengthen the relationship between dogs and humans. Many owners use it to improve focus, reduce anxiety, encourage calm behavior, and better understand how dogs think emotionally. You can find it in the description below if you'd like to learn more. And if you enjoy these emotional explorations into canine psychology and behavior, don't forget to subscribe to Canine Code. Because every week, we explore the hidden emotional world of dogs and the quiet behaviors that often mean far more than people realize. So the next time your dog quietly walks over during a difficult moment, or simply stays beside you in silence, don't assume it means nothing, because your dog may understand more about your emotions than you ever imagined possible. And maybe, after thousands of years beside humans, dogs learned something extraordinary. Sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone is simply stay close while they hurt.